tweet to talk at Talk Radio, text saying talk to 87222, and of course download the TV app, watch us on the website. So many ways to get involved. Don't hold back. You are of course listening to Tice Talk here on Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB and on your smart speaker. This is Talk Radio.
Well, a very warm welcome to you from Manchester. And actually the skies are clear here. The weather is not too bad, and we've had so much difficult news. We've had so much gloom about, and my Sunday sermon last week was, I was really anxious and still am anxious about the self-inflicted energy crisis inflicted by this Conservative government. But I thought this week, let's try and lift up our eyes. Let's seek the positives. Let's try and find the good news, establish the potential. How do we motivate our children by the dreams of great glory in our incredible nation? Here endeth the sermon. No, I'm only joking. It's not that bad. We can do much better than that. It took a positive Herculean effort, but actually we can and must have big, bold, ambitious dreams. I want your calls, your ideas with the potential, what you think still is the unleashed potential here in the UK. I have to say, just thinking about the positives was good for me. I'm an optimist. The glass is always half full. It's never half empty. And so we can look at this potential. We've got so much surely to move forward from post-Brexit. I'm dreaming of a high-growth economy with low taxes and smart regulations. I'm thinking that we could become the envy of the world in so many ways. Let's continue to dream. Why not dream of a healthcare system with zero waiting lists, where you could see your GP in 1 or 2 days, where you could see a consultant in 1 or 2 weeks, where you could get an operation if you need one within a couple of weeks after that, so that you get rid of that pain, that agony, that suffering. Just think about how our loved healthcare system, the NHS, would then become literally the envy of the world. I'm dreaming of cheap, reliable, affordable energy, creating tens of thousands of jobs whilst also reducing emissions. I'm dreaming of a police force that we see on the streets, preventing crime, with great technology that they use, so that actually where you see offences, we might get a charging rate of, let's say, 50% of offences committed. Whereas at the moment, I have to tell you, the charge rate relative to offences committed is just 7%. These are great dreams. We can have a police force that once again is the envy of the world. I'm thinking of incredible technology, that amazing brand name, Rolls-Royce, who's looking to become a world leader in the latest, what they call small modular nuclear reactors, that we could use here in the UK to reduce emissions, to guarantee us lots of cheap electricity, and then sell that technology around the world. I'm thinking of who's going to be the next amazing Brit who develops some incredible technology, like Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web. Where's the next Brit coming from, like Sir Johnny Ive, who worked for Apple and who designed those beautiful, elegant, amazing, stunning creations like the casing for the iPod, for the iPad, the iPhone. I mean, these are items of great beauty, actually designed by a Brit. Where's that next designer coming from? Is it one of your children, one of your grandchildren? These are the things to look forward to. I'm thinking of how we grow our amazing music industry. Who's going to be the next pop icons? When you're as old as me, you think of the Beatles, you think of Elton John and Phil Collins and maybe McFly and a few others. But, the great British music industry can go surely from strength to strength. Now, of course, thinking of glasses being half full, I'm also thinking of the growing English wine industry, which is doing so well. I'm thinking of the growing Great British cheese industry, again, which is doing really well. Other amazing British institutions, whether it's how do we grow our pubs, a wonderful British institution, more fish and chips, things like, more tea, beef and Yorkshire pudding. These are great British institutions that we need to be inspired by. I know that with these things we really can make ourselves the envy of the world again. We've got such great brand names, of course, as we lead the Commonwealth, of course, led by none other than the amazing, the inspirational Queen. I'm thinking of how do we grow our Premier League, which is actually probably an envy of the world already, with some of those amazing brand names, obviously led by Liverpool, but there's a few others, I believe, like Manchester United and Manchester City, and I suppose you squeeze in Arsenal there and Chelsea and some team called Spurs. But, you know, the Premier League is a great thing that we can grow and be proud of. We've got, of course, one of the greatest cities in the world, London, despite Sadiq Khan. Our military, of course, the outstanding reputation of our special forces like the SAS, the Marines, the paratroopers. You know, we can grow that reputation. There's actually so much that we should hang on to, whether it's other brand names like Bentley, Land Rover, Mini, The Sun, Dyson, the City of London, black cabs, red buses, all these things. I want your views. Tell us, what inspires you? What do you think will unleash the potential? And then, of course, there is the quintessential, shaken, not stirred, and thankfully, still just a man, James Bond. The other thing we should celebrate, which I learnt this weekend, I'd forgotten, that for 300 years, incredibly, French was the official English language, the official language here in the UK. And next year we can celebrate that it's 660 years since French was the official language. Well, these are some of the great things that I think we can dream about, how we unleash the potential here in the UK. But call me, text me, tweet me with your ideas, your views about what inspires you, about how we can be an even better envy of the world, the United Kingdom. Here endeth my Sunday sermon, and you're listening at 10:14 to Tice Talk, here on Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Welcome back here to Tice Talk on Talk Radio, which is of course one of the other envies of the world for the United Kingdom, because we have here in the UK literally the world's fastest growing talk radio station, and it's a great pleasure to be involved. Now, it's party conference season, and we're up in Manchester. Not only is the Reform UK conference, but there is the Conservative Party conference starting today, running for 3 days, and apparently the Prime Minister has been spotted this morning out for a run. There's only one thing though. He obviously forgot his running gear, or he had a long night because he was still in his last night's shirt. Anyway, makes for a great picture. But I'm delighted to talk about the Conservative Party conference, the messaging that we're likely to hear, indeed what people hope to hear from the Prime Minister. We've got Peter Bone MP for Wellingborough, who is on the line to discuss what he'd like to hear from the Prime Minister about what people used to understand conservatism meant. Peter, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining me on my show. How are you doing? Are you in Manchester, or have you avoided the scrum?
Well, I'm actually in Wellingborough in the constituency. I'm recovering actually from quite a bad bout of COVID, so I didn't think going up Manchester would be quite right at the moment. But I should go out campaigning this afternoon in Northamptonshire, part of the listening campaign. I have to say, I saw the picture of Boris running, and I know it's the London Marathon today. He probably is the only politician that's scruffier than me, and that takes an accolade. I think someone ought to buy him some proper running kit.
Maybe that'll be your Christmas present to him, Peter. Well, I'm glad to hear you're hopefully recovering from COVID. Hope it hasn't been too bad for you. So, Peter, it's obviously been this is a difficult time for the government. There's all sorts of crises coming at them from a number of different directions. What are you hoping that the Prime Minister will say when he speaks on Wednesday? I mean, firstly, I guess we all hope he doesn't speak for 88 minutes and that he's a little shorter and more concise and has something memorable that the nation who's looking for leadership, looking for motivation, can take away. You know him of old, Peter. What are you hoping that he enthuses you with?
Well, he'll bring the conference together, he'll end the conference, and he will cheer the nation up. He has a brilliant ability, whatever the situation, to make you feel happier after listening to him. And gosh, we needed that during the pandemic. But I think my moment of the conference will be what Priti Patel says. It seems to me the single biggest issue that we have to tackle now is stopping illegal immigration across the channel from France. And I know the government has got the Borders Bill, which is coming back in just a couple of weeks' time. But we have to stop this. We have to stop these illegal gangs profiting from smuggling young men across the channel who are clearly just economic migrants. And we have to be tough on that. So I really hope that Priti Patel will say, make it very, very clear that we're not going to tolerate this anymore.
But the thing is, Peter, we hear warm words, positive, optimistic words, the sort of language that people want to hear from the Home Secretary, and we hear it time and time again, and it does sound good. But the problem is that I think people have come to realise that it's never followed up by any form of delivery of action. We had threat commanders appointed, we've had new appointments, we've had pictures of new boats, dinghies, and indeed jet skis patrolling the channel, but it's making no difference whatsoever. Surely the real key, though, Peter, on this is actually we've got to turn the boats back, and we've got to take the boats back to France in the same way that Australia did. And it's only when the Home Secretary does that this is going to change.
Well, you're absolutely right. I spent many years chairing the all-party group against human traffickers, and these are the most evil people in the world. They're organised crime, and what they will do is go somewhere else if you're tough. If you stop it, if you turn boats back, you will end this problem. Now, Priti Patel's already said she's prepared to do that. Jacob Rees-Mogg only in the House of Commons recently said that's what should happen. I've introduced a private member's bill to allow that to happen. But the thing that's encouraged me most in the last couple of weeks is that they've reshuffled the government, and the minister now in charge of turning the boats back and sorting this out under Priti Patel is my colleague Tom Persclub, who you worked with in Grassroots Out, and he is determined to do that. But that's why I say it's the most important thing in this conference, to hear that that's going to happen. The bill's before Parliament. Let's get the bill through. Let's change the law, and then let's act. Now we'll have all the Labour lot moaning about it and saying it's against people's human rights. No, it's not. These people are being trafficked illegally into this country. It's not good for anyone, and it's certainly not right that the French government is assisting evil gangs to make huge sums of money.
Well, I know you've got confidence, Peter, in Tom Persclub, who you've worked closely with over many years. And, you know, we wish him every success in achieving that. And it may be that we have to scrap the Human Rights Act if it's impossible to achieve what I suspect that your constituents are saying, what Tom Persclub's constituents are saying, and millions up and down the country. Because, you know, as a nation, we've always welcomed and been hospitable and wanted smart, lawful immigration. But I think people are sick and tired of illegal immigration. Can we move on, Peter, to talk about the other issues that facing? I mean, certainly in the south of England,
$55,000 tests postponed. I mean, if we had 55,000 more drivers, we wouldn't have a problem now. And that's one of the problems, the economic problems that came up because of the lockdowns. And as you rightly challenged throughout the lockdown, that we mustn't concentrate just on COVID. We've got to recognize
huge energy bills dropping through their doormats, as I said, and I'm quite sure I'll be getting tweets and calls about this through the morning on 0344 499 1000. At a time also when we've got inflation growing, Peter, and the prospect of things that these things called tax rises that people used to expect from a Labour Party, but now seem to be coming from a Conservative government that said they wouldn't raise taxes. What's going on here, Peter? What am I getting wrong? What are my listeners getting wrong?
Well, no,
in terms of understanding about what conservatism means.
You're absolutely right, Richard, about the problem with tax rises. Whenever is the Conservative answer to an economic problem tax rises, new taxes, and billions and billions of additional public spending? That isn't the Conservative solution. Unfortunately, that was what was announced a week or so ago, and I think that's wrong. It was a very traditional answer to a problem. It seems to me it was made too early. Let's have the budget in October. Let's make sure that we control day-to-day public spending, and over the years pay back the debt that's been incurred because of the pandemic. I really don't think it was a very treasury orientated answer to the problem. Whereas if you had lower taxes and more growth and controlled public expenditure, I mean, why not scrap HS2 if you're worried about huge costs?
Exactly. I mean, that would save you. That would save you 100 billion at a stroke, Peter. And also, we're still testing 1 million healthy people a day. That might boost the profits of big pharma companies, but that's not doing nothing for public finances at a time when the government's planning to cut the universal credit of the support of £20 a week when people's energy prices are going up. I mean, it seems completely arse about face to me.
Well, you want to control public expenditure and bring it in line, and that's what you would normally do at a budget. I'm not well enough informed on the testing. I mean, I was very grateful that I could test when I felt ill one night. The double red line came up on the lateral flow test, and the next day the PCR came back confirming it. So, that was clearly and it was very good that people around me could test the lateral flow and find out that they weren't infected. But I also think that you have to control public expenditure. The removal of the temporary increase in universal credit seems correct because it was only temporary. But what we shouldn't be doing is hiking taxes. I mean, that's just not the conservative way. If you want to hike taxes and spend billions and billions of pounds, you might as well have a Labour government, which is not what the people voted for.
Well, there we are. That's what worries me, Peter. Could you have a word with your Chancellor, please? I've got to go to the news, Peter, but thank you so much for your thoughts on what you're expecting to hear this week from the Prime Minister and the leaders. We're approaching the news, but there you are. That's the views of one concerned Conservative MP. Give us your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Send us some texts or tweets. Coming up after the news, we'll be talking to a former Metropolitan Police officer about the Commissioner of the Met, Cressida Dick. It's Tice Talk here on Talk Radio.
Online and on your smart TV. Talk Radio TV News.
Here are your headlines. I'm Nadira Tudor. Questions raised about Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, and how he was granted permission to protect Parliament. And the marathon returns to the streets of London for the first time since COVID. It's been revealed that Wayne Couzens was on duty at Parliament at least 5 times last year. The police have confirmed that Sarah Everard's killer was deployed to guard MPs at the House of Commons. The Speaker has demanded an urgent meeting with the force to discuss the vetting process. It comes as Police Scotland announces it will offer verification checks to members of the public who are approached by loan officers for reassurance following the murder of Sarah Everard. The Prime Minister has vowed to make big, bold decisions on the UK's economy following the COVID crisis as Tory MPs gather for their party conference. Boris Johnson will champion the event's Build Back Better slogan, but the 4-day event in Manchester begins amid a backdrop of petrol shortages and panic buying. From tomorrow, the military is to begin delivering supplies across the UK as the government announces extending the temporary visa scheme for around 5,000 foreign lorry drivers. But the PM has accused the haulage industry of being too reliant on low-paid immigration.
Wages didn't go up and facilities, standards, the quality of the job didn't go up. So the weird thing is now that people don't want to go in to the road haulage industry, don't want to be lorry drivers precisely because we've had that massive immigration approach.
And the London Marathon says it's a celebration of togetherness as the event returns after COVID. 40,000 runners are taking in London this morning, while others are taking part virtually. That's your news on Talk Radio TV. More in half an hour.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Tice Talk, here live from Manchester in the middle of party conference season. It's 10:32 in my just 2-hour show this morning. You've heard my Sunday sermon. What are your thoughts? What are the positives that you can see at the moment amongst all of the challenges? After 11 o'clock, we're going to be talking about the French fishing row and how some people in France have been suggesting maybe they should block the Channel Tunnel, or further threats of cutting off electricity from Jersey. We'll be hearing from former MEP June Mummery. But now we need to return to the question of who's in charge of the Metropolitan Police at this really difficult time. You'll recall that just a few weeks ago, the Home Secretary gave an extension to the term of office to the Commissioner for the Met Police, Cressida Dick, and the really motivational reason that the Home Secretary gave was continuity. Not that she was brilliant at the job, not that she'd motivated all her brave police men and women, not that she'd driven down knife crime, driven down the murder rate, upped the conviction rate. No, just that continuity. It's not really that inspiring, is it? And then, of course, we've had the shocking details that came out from the conviction and the putting away for a whole life order of the murderer of poor Sarah Everard. So this is a difficult time for the Met Police. Look, we all want to trust and support and respect the police officers. We know they've got a difficult job. No one's ever said it's easy, least of all me. But we do need some accountability. We do need some strong leadership. We need some consistent, firm leadership to help the men and women, the officers on the front line. I'm delighted now to be joined by a former Met Police officer, Michael Pastor, to give us his thoughts on where things are at now. A very good morning to you, Michael. So this is obviously a difficult time for officers in the Met, and I guess also actually an anxious time, a troubling time for for former Met officers like your good self. What's the mood? You've probably got some people still in the Met. You left, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. What's the mood amongst officers, Michael?
Yeah, good morning, Richard, and thanks for having me on your show. I think it's somewhat a very difficult time for the rank and file police officers, not just within the Metropolitan Police, but also from a nationwide perspective. We're very lucky and fortunate that the quality of officers that we do have on the ground throughout the UK, the bulk do an absolutely sterling job for us, looking after us, working very, very long shifts and making sure that we're safe and secure as we go about our daily business. I think from a morale perspective, it's never been at such a low point, certainly since I can think of, dating back to around 1997. Police officers do expect that they can go out, do their job and finish their shift after a hard day. I think the bulk of them now are at the point where they're just finding themselves spending a ridiculous amount of time on the beat, impacting on their work-life balance. There's no doubt about that at all. And really looking for some direction and some actual leadership from the top, which sadly seems to be lacking at the moment, Richard.
Well, that sounds then, Michael, as though you're with me. I mean, I've called for some accountability. I just think anybody in a top leadership position, like Cressida Dix, I find it extraordinary that she still thinks that it's tenable to remain in office at a time when the official advice from the Met Police to women who live and operate and work and go around London is that if you get approached by a police officer on their own, don't trust them. Try and hail down a bus or a taxi. I mean, this is extraordinary. Do you agree that she should go? I mean, do you agree that the officers need new leadership, new confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's extraordinary, isn't it, that in any other organisation, be it from a public or a commercial sector perspective, that as a CEO or chairman of an organisation, you would be accountable for performance. the fact is, under Cresta Dick's commission, violent crime has gone up, sexual crime has gone up, robbery has gone up, theft has gone up. There has to be some accountability somewhere. Also, we do look at political impartiality for the police force. It was formed on the Pillian principles back in the 1830s that policing would be formed on the basis of political impartiality. And I do wonder, Richard, how that is possible when the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police is appointed, by a threefold approach, actually. The Mayor of London, the Home Secretary, and also the unelected Metropolitan Police Authority. One does wonder on what basis they decided that there was a need for her to stay in power.
It's pretty grim if their sole justification for reappointing her is continuity. To my listeners and viewers, give us a call with your thoughts, particularly if you're in London, your views on whether or not Cresta Dick should stay or go. 0344 499 1000 is the number, because I know there are lots of people, in particular women living in London, who really are very concerned. Michael, is it essential that a new commissioner, if one was appointed, has to come from the Met Police, or could it come even from outside the police? For example, a senior ranking colonel, brigadier, or general from for example, from the army.
Well, it's unusual for someone directly from the Met to be appointed as commissioner, Richard. The usual way is that they will look at chief constables from a county force and appoint on that basis. There have been a few examples recently where the deputy commissioner has then taken on board the role of commissioner, but the MPA with the Home Secretary and the Mayor of London will look across the board at potential chief constables. I see no reason why someone who's been very, very successful in business or indeed from the armed forces can't take on the role of commissioner. It is a strategic role. We're looking for someone who has got a background in achieving success. So I see no reason why it can't come from someone outside of the Metropolitan Police or indeed policing.
I think it is so essential. It just feels to me at the moment that actually we are crying out for leadership, and I'm quite sure people view that. I've got a tweet here, for example, says in response to my Sunday sermon, Richard, I do not want to be the envy of the world. I just want our police service, our civil service, and the National Health Service to run effectively, efficiently, and economically. Not too much an ask, is it? Well, I mean, in regard to the police force and things, I was astonished, Michael, to see that the charge rate relative to offences now in the UK is just 7%. It's halved in the last 5 years, from 15 to I think 2019. What's going on? What's going so wrong?
Well, I think officers on the ground, the rank and file police officers, deserve better. As I said earlier, Richard, they put their lives on the line every day. The majority of our police officers do an absolutely sterling job. But after the point of arrest, the amount of time that's taken up with them completing basic admin tasks and putting together case files takes up an obscene amount of time. It is then a case that for the bulk of offences, that will then be put to the Crown Prosecution Service to then make a decision on whether a person is to be charged or not. And maybe now it's time to say, look, let's put that back in the hands of our policing professionals to make those decisions, because that no doubt would have a significant impact on the charge rate ratio. And as you say, at the moment, it is obscenely low, particularly with serious sexual offences. For example, with rape, we're only seeing a 2% conviction rate. And what message does that send out to victims of that horrendous crime when charge and conviction rates are so low?
It sends a terrible message, and I think also it's a terrible message to the public at large. But actually, I think it's also a terrible message to police officers, who either they feel they're being let down by the CPS, when they find an offender, they put them up to be charged, and then such a low percentage are then charged and convicted. It feels to me that's that's bad for morale. I think I'm right in saying,
Yeah.
before we finish, Peter, that actually the application numbers for new police officers is actually quite strong, is quite good. Maybe that's is that true, and is that some good news?
Well, I mean, applications have always been particularly high for policing across the country, and that goes back to the Blair government of 1997, actually, Richard, when initially there was a drive to recruit more police officers. The fact, though, that there is a number of vacancies to be filled actually does paint a bit of an inaccurate picture. And what I mean by that is that it's now reflected that 80% of our serving police officers have 5 years or less service. And that can be a bit of a worry, because we do look at officers that have got significant experience who can assist those that are young in service. And as I say, there's no doubt that those in the early stages of their career will go on to be absolutely fantastic police officers. But it's so important that we have experience in the police force that can guide them in the right direction. So applications are up, but I think it's more of a case that because there's been so many police officers that have the experience have left for a number of reasons.
Yeah, well, let's hope we get some new leadership that can motivate, enthuse, and retain great police officers, great men and women in the force that can help build up that conviction rate, build up the trust and confidence from all of us in the public. Michael, thank you so much for your thoughts, those insights this Sunday morning on Tice Talk. I really do appreciate it. Well, there you are, some views from Michael Pastor, former Met police officer. Give me your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, with your views of whether you're optimistic about the Met getting some trust and confidence back, or what needs to be done. Or send us a tweet or a text. The time now is 10:44. Coming up after 11 o'clock, we're going to be talking the French fishing row. But for now, you're listening to Tice Talk here on Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Sunday the 3rd of October, live from Manchester. It's 10:49. We've been talking about what a Conservative MP, Peter Bone, wanted to hear from the Prime Minister. We've been hearing from a former Metropolitan Police officer about the challenges in the Met Police, the loss of confidence, and whether or not Cressida Dick should remain or resign. I want your views, your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. There's a tweet coming here from Neil that says, first and foremost, what this country needs desperately is an honourable government that has integrity, backbone, and that works for its constituents, not their own gain. We've lost faith with the status quo. Well, I think that's pretty clear from Neil. We've got Alison on the line in Alloa in Scotland with her thoughts, I think, on the police. Alison, a very good morning to you. How are you doing?
Yeah, fine, thanks, Richard. I was just phoning up.
Great. So what are your thoughts on the police? Yeah.
Well, I think for the last 20 years gone by the Rotherham gang rape, prostitution with all these kids, that it's not just, my heart goes out to Sarah and her family, but this has been going on for 20 years and there's too much political correctness and too many woke in the police. And if they go back to basics, best person for the job, I think women and white girls would be a lot safer.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Is that are you sensing that there's an increased anxiety amongst women, young women, girls, when in towns or cities, Alison? Is that what you and your friends are sort of thinking, hearing?
Yeah, well, we're not thinking and hearing it. It's fact. It's on the news. I mean, 20 years, these girls through Rotherham have had a terrible time, and that's every city in the full of the United Kingdom. Glasgow is every bit as bad as Rotherham. It's just covered up. And there's too much political correctness. Instead of the best person for the job, they're making sure that it's colour, that it's gender.
And Alison, why do you think it's... Where do you think this loss of leadership has come from? I mean, we are an amazing nation, and we've had some outstanding leaders in all the institutions, whether it's the police, the civil service, government. What's happened? Is it political correctness? Is it what people are being taught in universities? What's gone on?
I think a lot of it's to do with that, and then there isn't proper representation in the government because they're not doing, the MPs aren't for each individual towns and villages. We need a referendum basically on the voting so that we're better represented throughout the UK and Westminster if we got a proper voting system.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more. I think a proportional representation system where you get a much fairer distribution of the elected representatives relative to the number of votes cast, I think actually means that it's a much fairer system. It's where every vote matters, every vote is valued, every vote essentially counts, as opposed to millions of people are disenfranchised in safe seats under first past the post. And I think that would increase voter engagement.
Well, I think so too, and then it would help the communities because they know their MP is actually doing the job for them. The way it stands now, the MPs are only self-sufficient for themselves, basically. Scotland, we have nowhere to vote. We can't vote Tory because, well, the high taxes and everything else, and then you subsidise all the green agenda and then you pay higher bills, so you're paying for it twice.
Yes, there certainly are challenges in Scotland with the SNPs essentially a completely dominant party. Do you see that changing, Alison, or is it locked in?
It's not going to change much unless the likes of your Reform UK comes up our way, because Labour's non-existent now in Scotland, and just like it's happening in England at the moment, that's Labour done now. Just like they've been in Scotland for the last 15 years or whatever.
That is, I couldn't agree more, Alison, on that. Thank you so much, Alison, from Aloha, with those thoughts about the lack of leadership, too much political correctness, too much wokeness in the police from her experience. And I think that's right, actually. What I can't put my finger on is what's caused this loss of confidence amongst leaders, particularly in the police. Maybe, listening or viewing, you've got some thoughts. Maybe you were in the police forces up and down the country. What's caused this weaker leadership, this increased sort of wokeness, possibly inconsistent policing? We need proper, robust, consistent policing that enthuses and motivates and gives confidence to all of us. Surely that has to be the right way forward. Give us a call, don't forget, 0344 499 1000 with your thoughts. Tweet us at Talk Radio, text talk to 87222. We want to hear your views, your input, or indeed if you actually want what you want to hear from the Prime Minister at this challenging time. After the news, of course, we're going to be talking to June Mummery, former MEP, about what's going on with our French neighbours, who seem to be raising the stakes a bit with regard to the negotiations on fishing licences. We've got, I think, David in Swindon calling just before we go to the top of the hour. David, are you there? Good morning.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Good morning. What would you like to say? Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, David. What would you like to say?
Right. This whole thing about President Dick, okay? I think that women are at this time in a position where we have the advantage that we have a woman police officer representing the police force at a time when women are now questioning the way the police force is being handled. Okay? I wonder how much of the problems which this lady has in the police force are being manipulated by male police officers and maybe we
I'm
should,
with you.
Maybe
it sounds to me
women, instead of
David, it sounds to me
about her, should actually be appealing to her nature as a woman, right? And all of the female,
I get that.
all of the female police officers, should also be considering what's happened, because at the end of this whole
David,
thing,
thank you so much for that thoughts. I get you, David. You want people to give more confidence, more support to Cressida Dick in her aims to try and improve the quality of leadership in the Met Police. I get that. That's an interesting alternative view. Has she got enough support, or is she being let down by others? Thank you for that. We're going to the news now. You're listening to Tice Talk on Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
online and on your smart TV. Talk Radio TV News.
Live at 11, I'm Nadira Tudor. Boris Johnson refuses to pull the big lever on immigration to resolve the shortage of lorry drivers. Questions raised about Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, and how he was granted permission to protect Parliament. And back after COVID, marathon runners take to the streets of London in the name of charity. Big, bold decisions on the UK's economy will be made, according to the Prime Minister, following the COVID crisis. Tory MPs have gathered for their party conference, and Boris Johnson will champion the event's Build Back Better slogan. However, the four-day event in Manchester starts amidst a backdrop of petrol shortages and panic buying. From tomorrow, the military is to begin delivering supplies across the UK, as the government announced it's extending the temporary visa scheme for around 5,000 foreign lorry drivers. Speaking to the BBC, the Prime Minister said controlled immigration is key.
The way forward for our country is not to just pull the big lever marked uncontrolled immigration and allow in huge numbers of people.
It's been revealed that Wayne Couzens was on duty at Parliament at least 5 times last year. He was deployed to guard MPs at the House of Commons, according to police. Consequently, the Speaker has now demanded an urgent meeting with the force to discuss the vetting process. Meanwhile, Police Scotland has announced verification checks will be offered to those who are approached by lone officers. This hopes to give reassurance to members of the public following the murder of Sarah Everard. A 15-year-old girl who tested positive for COVID has died on the same day as she was due to get her vaccine. Georgia Halliday from Portsmouth was taken to Queen Alexandra Hospital on Tuesday. Her mother has said she was a loving girl, a talented kickboxer and an aspiring musician. Police could soon have tougher powers to tackle demonstrators blocking roads. Priti Patel has promised the new measures after climate group Insulate Britain staged a number of motorway protests over the last 3 weeks. The government has taken out a new injunction, meaning anyone blocking major roads could face imprisonment or an unlimited fine. It also gives police the power to seize protesters' equipment. And the London Marathon says it's a celebration of togetherness as the event returns after COVID. 40,000 runners are taking part in the 26.2-mile charity fundraiser in London at the moment, while others are taking part virtually in cities across the UK. Event organisers say it's a celebration of all the good that comes when we're united. And your weather, heavy rain and severe gales to the north will clear later to bring sunny spells for most. There'll be highs of 17 degrees. That's your live news on Talk Radio TV. More in half an hour.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Tice Talk on Talk Radio. It's the second hour of my 2-hour show. We're trying to pack it in this session before I go and give my leader's speech. We've got tweets coming in about policing. One here from Lynn. The problem began when university graduates were fast-tracked through the police, no experience of the real world and little policing experience. The same with MPs, no experience beyond politics. Well, we've got Anne in Burgess Hill with probably some thoughts of her own. Good morning, Anne. What are your thoughts on this issue?
Good morning. I'll give you my thoughts, if they're worth anything. I heard somebody this morning in his 60s saying he would never treat women that way. And I thought, yes, because older people were raised in a society where it was Christian and maybe Jewish or whatever, but people had beliefs, even if they didn't go to church, It was a much more caring world. There were other in the cities. The other thing is, I've got sons and daughters. You know, mothers raise sons. My sons would come and, you know, we talked about these issues. And so that's important. But I will tell you that two of my daughter and granddaughter suffered dreadfully at the hands of males. And so I'm quite passionate about this, that we've got to do better.
Sure.
Pornography is life, isn't it? Even children are looking at things that they should never look at. So we've got to take our society more seriously and protect women and men I know are attacked. Something has got to change, and policing, of course, is part of it. And I'm going through very quickly some of the issues that concern me. Sorry, carry on.
I'm with you, Anna. No, that's right. And thank you for that. I'm so sorry you've had problems in your own family in terms of challenges with men. I think you're right, actually, and that there needs to be, I think, better education, better understanding. Social media is definitely one of the challenges here. But Anne, I've got to go to my next guest, but thank you very much for those thoughts. That was Anne from Burgess Hill with her concerns about the challenges faced by women. We have now, though, we're going to move on to talk about fishing and the negotiations with our neighbours, the French, who seem to be potentially taking quite a hard line. Suggestions they might even block the Channel Tunnel if we don't grant more fishing licences. This is after their threat a few weeks ago to cut the electricity off from Jersey. Is it a coincidence that there was a dodgy French connector just at a time we needed some electricity a few days ago? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by June Mummery, former Brexit Party MEP, founder of Reef, which is the renaissance of the East Anglian fisheries. A very good morning to you, June. Great to see you and talk with you. Thanks for being with us. So, June, you know as much, you know more than anybody really about where the situation's at, where the negotiations are getting to. What's really going on here? Is it just the French expecting to have exactly what they had before the end of the transition period? Is this to do with the size of the boats? Help my viewers and listeners with what's really going on.
Well, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. What the French want now are just another 35 small vessels to come in our 6 to 12 miles. But what we have to look at is what the French do have. The French have 92% of the cod in the English Channel. In the Celtic seas, they have 3 times the British allocation of Dover sole, 4 times more cod and 5 times more haddock. 33,000 tonnes of fish that arrives on Boulogne market each year, 2/3 of that come from our waters. So they are spitting their dummy out over 35 vessels. They're going to block the channel. Well, where was 5 minutes ago, Mr. Macron was asking us to bail that channel out. So what is this really all about? What has happened here, Richard? They are not entitled to those licences. They haven't got a track record. It's as simple as that. If they want to complain to anybody, complain to your government, because they have told us that you haven't fished there. That's basically simple. But, like you say, is this about something else?
So that's the interesting point, isn't it, June, that they have to provide the evidence that they've fished there before and therefore they've got the rights to continue. And so have they just not, are they essentially spinning a yarn? Have they not got that evidence because bluntly they weren't fishing there before or something else?
Well, they haven't got the track record. They declined to have VMS, which are cameras on board. I think 12 did, the rest of them didn't. And there you go. So they didn't want the cameras on board. They have no track record. The same goes for our fishermen in the UK. I've got lots of fishermen that have caught bass. But if they can't prove they caught bass, then they're not entitled to catch it. It's all quite straightforward. And in my humble opinion, Richard, it's about time we told the EU to trigger Article 16, get us completely out of it. Every week there's another crisis. Our ocean is in crisis. We have super trawlers. We have the Dutch have now rigged their gear up to be to have fly shooters in the English in the Channel. Well, we haven't got the stocks. If we're not careful, we are looking at a Grand Bank situation, similar to what happened in Canada when the cod was overfished. Once that fish is gone, it's gone.
So this then is a really key point, Jude, isn't it? Are you saying and fearing that we're at a point now where, from a sustainability point of view, in the waters around the United Kingdom and certainly particularly key areas, that actually we should be invoking sustainability to, in a sense, dramatically cut back all fishing, including perhaps from our own fishermen, in order to allow stocks to recover and to get a real understanding of where stock levels are and what's the right level of fishing to ensure sustainability. Is it that bad, June?
No, we just want rid of foreign vessels. Our government granted 1,659 EU vessels, 8 of which are super trawlers, Richard. We have some of the finest fishing grounds in the world. We want the opportunity to fish them ourselves. That's all we want. We cannot handle any more vessels. Our fishermen are thinking about tying their boats up. And we hear our Prime Minister only this morning, build back better. Well, what about coastal communities? There's 186 coastal MPs. They have done absolutely nothing. The sooner we get them out of those seats in Parliament, the better. Get some real people in there who actually want to do the job, the privileged job they've got to look after their constituencies and their constituents, creating thousands of jobs, which you can through fishing. Get rid of this big wind energy, stop sucking on the wind farm milk, and get on with creating some proper jobs through our ocean, whether it's oil and gas, aggregates, fishing, wind energy.
Fishing.
We must, as a country, be harvesting it ourselves.
Well, that's the key point. We need some self-reliance. So June, just to finish this, actually, I think what you're really saying, June, is that as long as we're in control of licenses for our boats, you think that there is sufficient fishing stocks at the moment. You're not at the point of calling, in a sense, a dramatic slowdown because of your sustainability fears. You're sort of fearing that's a bit further down the road.
Richard, we had electric pulse fishing off the East Coast. 10 years. Our government ignored that and allowed the Dutch to plunder. There is no fish on the East Coast. It is barren. I've got fishermen out there, fishermen that have been fishing for 50 years. They can't find anything. So what has happened now, we're allowing the Dutch now to rig their fly shooters up with big heavy gear, which should be capped, and are now in the Channel doing exactly the same thing. When do we say, no, enough's enough, bon voyage to the EU vessels, and just get on with maintaining our own UK fishing industry?
There we are. Well, I think that's pretty clear from June. June would like to say bon voyage to our neighbouring fishing boats and focus on British fishing. I am very, very sympathetic. June, thank you so much for those clear thoughts. No nonsense, no messing around, as always. We've got a text message coming in here from our previous discussion about the police, saying, Richard, the problem is all politicians, police seem to think the whole of the nation is on Twitter and that Twitter controls the country. The Tories will have a shock at the next election. It goes on to say, I retired from the Met in 2006. Even then, this is interesting, even then the organisation was governed by politics and we're now like the USA. That's interesting. Phil says, doesn't matter who the police commissioner is. That's very interesting. I would have thought, I'm surprised by that, I would have thought that actually strong leadership, a clear sense of direction, a clear sense of encouragement and confidence, both to the officers of the respective police force, but also to the local community, is absolutely critical. Phil has a different view there. We have another tweet here from, I think it's Kelt, who says we need leaders, jobs on merit, regardless of sex, orientation or skin colour. We need a police force that does what it's paid to do, to fight crime and not be politically woke. That sounds about right to me. Well, coming up after the break, we're going to be moving on to talk about where we are with the vaccine rollouts, data, what's going on with Pfizer, with Dr. René Hoendekamp. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. I want to hear your views, your thoughts. The time is 11:15. It's Tice Talk here on Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk Radio. It's 11:19, and just before the break, we had some no-nonsense, clear messages from the former MEP June Mummery about taking back control of our fisheries. She had a strong message for the Prime Minister. Well, we're going to move on to talk about the latest news on vaccines, take-up, what's going on. I'm delighted we're joined now by Dr. René Hoendekamp, who is a NHS GP and medical writer, to discuss the latest news and in particular where we are now with the data on take up amongst young people, particularly the under 18s, under 16s. Rennie, very good morning to you this Sunday. Thanks for joining us. What's your understanding of the take up in schools of 12 to 15-year-olds and 16 and 17-year-olds? There doesn't seem to be that much data coming forwards. What's that telling us?
So there really doesn't. So we don't really have any data on that. And all I can glean, Richard, is probably what you have from the press. And it does seem that as you go down the ages, take-up seems to be a little bit less than as we've seen in adults, where it's actually been really high. So I think that's just a sign of uncertainty amongst parents and also in teenagers not really knowing what or why they're doing this.
Right. And there was sort of an issue about the consent forms and whether or not it was appropriate in schools. I think that was changed. What are you hearing about? Is it now accepted that consent has to be given by the parent for 12 to 15-year-olds? Is that really happening?
So as far as I can tell, parents are being sent consent forms at home where they can either decline or accept the vaccine on behalf of their child. And that is exactly as it should be. And I'm pleased that that's happening. And I would always expect that to happen because that's how we work in the NHS with any vaccine that we give to somebody who's under 18. However, there still is this unclear statement from both Nadhim Zahawi and I think Sajid Javid that if a child expresses a wish that they want to have a vaccine and their parent has declined, then there will be this Gillick competence assessment within a school to decide that that can actually happen. And I think that's unwise. I think the moment as a society where we start dividing parents' decision-making powers from their children, I think we've really just wandered into really uncharted territory that's dangerous, because then where else does it go? What else can a child decide that they want to do? You know, drink alcohol, drive a car, not go to school anymore. You know, I think parents should have, you know, the right over their children to decide what's best for them.
Yeah, quite right. I mean, I'm with you completely on this. It feels very much like the thin end of the wedge, like so many other of the measures like vaccine passports that this government has sort of been on the edge of introducing. I just want to move on now to some of the other aspects of vaccinating people and treating people with this horrible virus, because you know, as we know, any medication carries a tiny level of risk. You know, we all understand that, and you know, information and data is absolutely key here, and many people may not be aware. I'm actually quite surprised how few people are aware that, you know, when one does get an adverse reaction, then there is a system in order to log that, so that the medical authorities, the pharma companies, the health service can learn what's going on. So we have this system, don't we, called the yellow card system in the UK to log about reactions. Indeed, for any vaccine. How well known is this system amongst people in the medical world and indeed amongst the wider community? And is it being used by doctors if they become aware of reactions?
Okay, so I mean, there's lots of different points there. I would like to think that all medical professionals are aware of the MHRA yellow card system, because we're putting our name on prescriptions for drugs and medications and vaccines every day. And so it's important that we have a way of feeding back if we think there might be a problem. I think the important thing to note is it's not for a doctor to decide, or a nurse or anyone else, to decide that a vaccine has caused a problem. All the yellow card system is for, and it's really important, is to identify that there's a problem with a patient. Then what happens is, if those are fed back all of the time, the MHRA, the overriding governing body, will actually see if there's a cluster of specific reactions, and then they can start investigating whether or not a drug or the vaccine or any other vaccine has caused it. So I don't think doctors or medical professionals should be worried that they are actually making a report to say that a medication or a vaccine has caused a problem. That's not what they're asking us for. They're asking us to just highlight any problems. And it's a very easy system. In relation to the COVID vaccine, there's actually an online portal, and it really doesn't take very long. So I'm worried that people, A, think it will take a long time. And let's face it, doctors, whether in a hospital or a GP, are under intense time pressure. So the thought of doing something that's going to take them half an hour, it's really quite daunting, I can tell you. But then again, they also need to know that actually it's simple, it's quick, and they don't even have to be the ones that can do it. The patient can do it as well. And I had a patient who actually beat me to it on one of these.
Right. I mean, I think that's fascinating because in the US they have a system, I think a very sophisticated system, which is called VARS, which I think stands for Vaccine Adverse Event Reaction System, where there's a lot of data collected, and that then is used extensively and gives real confidence and understanding and extra data that the authorities and the pharma companies can learn from. Is our yellow card system, is there enough detail in it, Renee? And you know, it just feels to me that in a sense, the more evidence and data you've got, then actually the more confidence all of us will have in any form of medication, because you know there's that feedback going in an honest and open and transparent way.
Yes, and I think there's two things that worry me about this. The first is that I think many professionals, including myself, are missing potential vaccine side effects because either patients are not reporting it to us or we're not joining the dots. And I say that having sat talking to colleagues, and we then between us go, oh, I wonder, and we hadn't thought about it at the time. I personally had a young patient who had pericarditis that I did not link to a vaccine. And only when he had it for the second time did I then look back at the timeline and see that it was exactly the same time span after his second vaccine. Did I join those dots? And actually, he had already joined the dots for himself and had reported it for himself. So I worry that we're not actually making those connections. And I think, therefore, we should say to all medical professionals, look, however small you think it is, however unlikely you think it is, if there has been any kind of reaction, just report it. It doesn't take long, and report it. I am reassured that although the yellow card reporting system itself is quick and easy and very simple, that when you actually report something serious, so I actually have a 21-year-old patient who has myocarditis after a vaccine, and that was reported by the hospital that he attended, the parent actually got questions back from the MHRA wanting much more detail. So I think they are picking up significant problems when they are reported, and they are then asking for more detail, and that's encouraging.
I mean, that's what we want. That improves information, it improves knowledge, it improves data, which, as I say, I think does build confidence. We shouldn't be afraid of that. People shouldn't be worried about reporting. It's really important. Just finally, just finally, I just wanted to catch up on the latest, your latest thoughts on where we are with boosters, Renee, because obviously some countries are like Israel are going through a huge sort of third dose program. What's the latest in the UK now with boosters and take up, and is that really the right way, or should we be actually using these doses to ensure that many more people around the world are getting their first dose?
Look, Richard, I think without doubt for vulnerable people who are at risk from dying from COVID, and trust me, vulnerable people have been dying from COVID, I think making sure that their immunity is as good as it can get is a good thing. The people I think who should be prioritised for boosters, and I know I'm not part of the JCVI, are those people who really didn't mount a very good or at all immune response to the first two vaccines. And I have someone in my family who falls into that category. They are a dialysis patient, and after 2 AstraZeneca vaccines did not have any antibodies at all. So we fought to try and get him a different vaccine, a Pfizer, to see if it would help, and couldn't get it. And yet now here we are. I see 50-year-olds who have no vulnerabilities apart from being 50, who are being offered boosters and having them as we speak, and he is still waiting for his. And I think Blood Cancer UK and the Kidney Association have also said this yesterday, that we are not putting these people at the top of the booster list. And that's probably the kind of people that we should be boostering. And then in terms of Yeah, we should be focusing on. And then in terms of everybody else, we should be thinking about the rest of the world. We should be thinking about people who have had no vaccines.
Brilliant. Renee, that's really helpful. I'm going to have to go to the news, but thank you so much for that latest update, your thoughts on the vaccine programme, on the yellow card system and on boosters. We're approaching 11:30. You're listening to Tice Talk. Stay with us. We've got lots more in the final half hour. This is Tice Talk.
Online and on your smart TV. Talk Radio TV News.
Here are your headlines. I'm Nadira Tudor. Boris Johnson refuses to pull the big lever on immigration to resolve the shortage of lorry drivers. And questions raised about Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, and how he was granted permission to protect Parliament. Big, bold decisions on the UK's economy will be made, according to the Prime Minister, following the COVID crisis. Tory MPs have gathered for their party conference, and Boris Johnson will champion the event's Build Back Better slogan. However, the four-day event in Manchester starts amidst a backdrop of petrol shortages and panic buying. From tomorrow, the military is to begin delivering supplies across the UK as the government announced it's extending the temporary visa scheme for around 5,000 foreign lorry drivers. Speaking to the BBC, the Prime Minister said controlled immigration is key.
The way forward for our country is not to just pull the big lever marked uncontrolled immigration and allow in huge numbers of people.
It's been revealed that Wayne Couzens was on duty at Parliament at least 5 times last year. He was deployed to guard MPs at the House of Commons, according to police. Consequently, the Speaker has now demanded an urgent meeting with the force to discuss the vetting process. And police could soon have tougher powers to tackle demonstrators blocking roads. Priti Patel has promised the new measures after climate group Insulate Britain staged a number of motorway protests over the last 3 weeks. The government has taken out a new injunction, meaning anyone blocking major roads could face imprisonment or an unlimited fine. It also gives police the power to seize protesters' equipment. That's your news on Talk Radio TV. More in half an hour.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk Radio. It's the last half hour of my 2-hour special live from Manchester. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. If you've got any thoughts, questions. We just had on before the news Dr. Renee Hundekamp with her thoughts on the vaccines, boosters and the yellow card system. And, you know, it's so important to make sure we've got proper data, proper information. And this is such a busy time at the moment. In Manchester, there's so much going on. There are thousands of people coming to the Conservative conference. There are many, many hundreds of people coming to the Reform UK conference. And goodness me, aren't the newspapers full of extraordinary news? I mean, the idea here in the Sunday Express, I can't believe the headline, literally, the military moving in. I mean, it's just extraordinary. Is that the state of our government, that basically they can't organise anything with a bit of help from the military? Goodness me. Anyway, we've got a caller, I think, Jean in Cheshire, talking with some thoughts on the vaccine. Jean, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Richard. Yes, I am a reformer. I am in...
Fantastic. Even better. What news from Cheshire?
Oh, what it is actually, Richard, last August, I started very badly with shingles. I'd only heard about it, but it was so bad. And by January, it was just about sort of, feeling comfortable. Then I had the jab. I didn't really want it, but I thought, well, I'll have it just in case. And I had my jab in February. I wasn't shown a yellow card, nothing. I didn't know anything about it. And I should not, or anybody who's just finished or just had shingles, should not have the jab. It was the well, I can never remember them. It's the first one, the Fibus, is it?
The Pfizer, yes, yeah.
Yeah. And it was only when
So
I only found out, actually, when I was without going into it, about the last 5 years I've had things wrong with me, sadly. And I was speaking to this nurse in the hospital, and she said something to me, and I said, oh, goodness, it wasn't as bad as shingles. I said, that was the worst ever. She said, did you have the jab? I said, yes. She said, well, you should never have the jab after you've had shingles. Didn't they show you the yellow card? I said, no. And that was it, Richard. They just want to get the jab in your arm, and they don't have
interesting.
the right...
Well, that's Jean, that's so interesting. And you see, that for me is about the quality of information and making sure that people are better informed so that, the right decisions are made. And I'm guessing when you were vaccinated, you should have been asked by the person giving you the jab certain questions, because the quality of data, the transparency, it actually improves confidence. In a sense, it shouldn't worry people. It should build confidence, and I think that's absolutely vital. Jean, so anyway, hopefully, Jean, all is okay now, is it?
No, I don't think I'll ever be better, and that's the sadness. What I was going to say to you is it's not a matter of just having the jab. What the jab does, it actually attacks the T. I've forgotten the names now. I'm nervous.
The T. No, don't be nervous at all. You talk about the T cells.
The T cells. It attacks the T cells, and the T cells. With me having had cancer and various other things, I needed all the antibodies that were, that was making me feel all right and getting better, and it totally destroys them, and they won't. I can't believe it. I mean, and it was only when, and apparently, the COVID that also can cause shingles. You can get shingles after you've had it. The jab, and also people that have shingles, it could even have been COVID at the time, because my pharmacist where I went to was smashing, and she said, we've got a pandemic of people with shingles, so I don't think they know.
Well, Jean, thank you so much for those thoughts. I'm not a scientist or a medic, so I can't comment on Jean's, the challenges that Jean has faced. But thank you for calling, Jean. And obviously, if anybody's got any concerns, you must share them with your GP, your pharmacist, to ensure that you get the right advice, which is out there. So that was it from Jean. If you've got any thoughts, questions, then don't hesitate. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. We want any more texts, any more tweets from you. We've got a text message here, another one saying the problem with policing is, again, no experience of the real world and little policing experience. I think it was an interesting point that the retired Med officer made about, we do need to try and find, if you've got greater leadership, people staying longer in the police, you've got more experience, that can be passed on to the newer recruits, younger officers. That is so important. We've got Michael in Eastbourne on the line. Good morning to you, Michael. What news down in Eastbourne? A long way from here in Manchester.
Yeah, it's a long way. Sorry, I couldn't make it up there. I'm calling about the jab.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's an intramuscular injection, right? And the procedure for intramuscular injections is that when you inject, you draw the needle back to check for blood in the syringe to make sure you're not hitting a blood vessel. That prevents the drug from going directly into the circulatory system, right, and going to the heart. But
you sound like you're a medic or a doctor, Michael.
Yeah, I used to be a nurse. The NHS and the CDC in America and WHO have said that you don't need to do that. but they do it for every other intramuscular injection. And there have been cases of pericarditis, myocardial, infections in the heart.
Yes, indeed.
And
yes, there've been some. That's right, myocarditis and
to be causing that. And I just wonder why the government are saying that. Sorry.
Well, that's interesting, Michael, and thank you for this. Obviously, I'm not a medic, but actually, in a sense, with the 12 to 15-year-olds, it was the concern about myocarditis that led the JCVI not to support a recommendation to vaccinate the 12 to 15-year-olds because of those very concerns. They looked very closely at the risk-reward ratio and concluded that the benefits didn't sufficiently outweigh the risk when they looked at the real data. Thank you for that, Michael, from Eastbourne. And it feels to me that we do need more data. We should welcome it, and that yellow card system should be used more, as René Hoendekamp was saying. Well, we're going to go to the break now. Don't hesitate. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text 87222. Tweet us at Talk Radio. You're listening to Tice Talk. The time now is 11:40 here at the home of common sense, Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk Radio. And we've just been talking about vaccines, the yellow card system, and some thoughts there, and some text messages coming in. Really interesting, actually. One person here saying, actually, they felt they had some shingles after one of the jabs, and they did report it onto the yellow card system. So that's good news. But another one here saying they weren't aware of the yellow card system, and good to hear about it. I do think that it's really important, if you do get a reaction, that we all learn more if it's properly reported. Well, we're going to talk about something else now before the end of the show. There's a thing that you may have forgotten about called Crossrail, where the government have poured about 20 billion quid of our money into a very long hole that goes from the west of London to the east of London. It started building, I think, back in 2009, which obviously is 11 or 12 years ago. It was due to open in December 2018, and here we are, October now. I'm so sorry, time moves on. October 21, and it's still not open, and it's rather silent. We've really got no idea when it's going to open. I think people have forgotten about it. I almost wonder, is it ever going to open? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Christian Woolmar, railway expert and author of The Story of Crossrail. Christian, a very good morning to you. So help me and my listeners. I mean, it's gone so quiet. As I recall, literally in September 18, a mere 3 months before this great tunnel was due to open, we were told it was going to be a year late, and here we are 3 years later and still no date. What is going on?
Well, you want the bad news or the good news? The bad news is that at the end of the day, it will probably cost about £19 billion, which is 3 or 4 billion over the original budget. But the good news is, I've been down the tunnels. I've seen most of the stations, and they are very nearly ready. And the thing about this, Richard, is that this is going to be the best railway in the world, the best urban railway. There is nothing to beat it. I mean, it is built on quite a large scale. It's roomy. The platforms are up to 250 meters long. You can barely see one end from the other. The trains will be protected by platform doors. It's built at extremely high safety standards. It's air conditioned. And the architecture in the stations are absolutely wonderful. So, and Londoners, I can tell you this, and I can guarantee you this, that despite all the hassle, and I can go into the hassle of the delays in a moment, despite all that, Londoners will take to it and be proud of it and think, gosh, why can't we have more of this? And as you say, it's taken 12 years.
That's really encouraging.
There have been mistakes on the way, but essentially we will end up with something magnificent.
That's encouraging. I wish if I'd known about it, as I talked about the envy of the world in my Sunday sermon. But I read recently, I think in the Standard, that there was now concerns about train delays. I know there'd been signalling issues. Are you confident, therefore, Christian, that essentially we're nearing the end of these challenges? And can you give me an estimated opening date?
Yes, I mean, I think we are near the end. There's a warning notice here. There's a big software drop due to happen this week, followed by another big software drop at the end of the month. And once these are done, we'll have a pretty good idea. Now, I've spoken to Andy Byford, who runs, who's the Transport Commissioner for London. I've spoken to Mark Wilde, the CEO, because I'm updating my book and I'm trying to time it in with when the thing opens. Because originally the first edition of the book was actually completed in December 2018, except there was no bloody railway there. So we sold a couple of thousand copies. But
language, Christian, it's a family show. It's a Sunday morning.
Yeah, so I've got kind of a vested interest in this, and privately they're kind of hoping for February, late February. Of course, the Queen's got to come along. It's called the Elizabeth Line, and we know where they got the name Elizabeth from. So there will be big ceremonies and the like. I suspect it might slip a month or two more. It all depends on this software drop. If you'd asked me in a couple of weeks' time, I'd probably have a better idea of it. And now, of course, the big question is, people want to know this, is why was it delayed for 3 years? And indeed, when I was writing my book in 2018, I was in the office the whole time, and they were saying, oh no, it's on time, it's on budget, it's all going to kind of happen. And then suddenly, it was August, not September actually, Richard, but in August, suddenly they said, they went to Sadiq and said, oops, sorry, this is not going to happen. But it'll probably happen in 2009. But they've got a new team.
So essentially, but essentially there must have been pulling the wool over people's eyes. There must have been covering something up or just plain lying, Christian.
I've looked into this. I've talked to all the people. These are, very good engineers, very straightforward on the whole people. And I think they were guilty of two things. There was a bit of emperor's new clothes about it. I think that some of them did know, and they didn't quite dare tell the bosses or tell TfL. And there was such an imperative that, right from 2009, they said this is going to open in December 2018. So it was a kind of, we don't want to let people down. We built the tunnels on time. We could do all of this. And I think the other aspect of this is that they greatly underestimated the task of building a railway in 2021, which is rather different from building, say, the first underground line, which was 1863. And it's different in so many respects, notably safety and notably kind of the technology. And this is Britain's first digital railway. So everything is digital. It's all controlled from a control centre in Romford.
Okay.
Which will find out whether there's a valve malfunctioning.
Sure.
Ready. So,
Christian, it sounds. I'm gonna have to wrap it up a little bit, Christian. But it sounds as though you're optimistic that the lessons are being learned and that it will open in the first half next year. I'm tempted to have a pint of Guinness with you that it won't be open by June the 30th. In a sense, I hope I lose that bet. But anyway, Christian Wilmar, thank you so much for those thoughts. That's a really optimistic update about Crossrail. I've had my concerns, and it's such a big project. And of course, we've got a Prime Minister who loves big spending projects. And I'm delighted now to be joined just before the end of the show by Peter Cardwell, who knows how the Prime Minister likes his big projects, and he's here in Manchester to talk about them, to talk about building back better. But we need to learn some lessons from this. I mean, crikey, we've got HS2, it could be 100 billion, it could be 200 billion, and we can't even get a railway to open for 20 billion. What's your sense as to where he's at on big spending with all the pressures?
You're absolutely right, Richard, and of course the Prime Minister loves these big spending projects. He loves being in his hard hat and his high-vis jacket, and he's here in Manchester, and the whole theme of Conservative Party conference already, just in another part of the city to where we are at the moment, is of course building back better, as you say. It's also about not relying on what has happened before in terms of that kind of low skills, low wages economy. He wants to push wages up, but that of course brings its own questions about what about the public sector. He can give everybody in the public sector a rise in their wages. Is that a good idea? Where's the money going to come from? He said this morning in a pretty tetchy interview actually on the BBC that he didn't want to raise taxes any more than he needed to. That wasn't an absolute no, taxes will not go up.
The problem is we keep hearing these promises. They don't want to do this, they don't want to do that. But then they go and do them.
Yes, and I think the reluctant nature of some of that, especially with the national insurance rise recently, is something that Boris Johnson certainly feels he can get away with. And I think that Rishi Sunak, he's got his big speech tomorrow at Conservative Party conference, and that is going to reveal the economic outlook for the next little while and where they see themselves. Of course, we can't rule out, and indeed the chairman of the Conservative Party, Oliver Dowden, didn't rule out an election in 2 years' time in 2023. So I think the Conservatives are moving into an election footing here.
That's interesting. Funny enough, I'm going to be talking at my conference about, my base case is that it's summer 23. I think the pain of these tax rises will start to be felt. I think that I worry about the pace of economic growth. I wonder what's happened to the traditional economic understanding, basic economics, which is that, if you want higher growth, you've got to cut taxes, you've got to create activity in the private sector. Everybody knows that an individual or a small business owner will get more value out of £1 in their pocket than a civil servant spending it on your behalf. We've just heard about the delays, in a sense, the concerns about spending money on Crossrail. But this government seems to have completely sort of forgotten that. They're into high tax, high regulation, and they've admitted they've got the lowest growth forecast for 60 years.
And it's not a very conservative way of doing things, a lot of people will say. Their excuse is, of course, the pandemic, the completely unprecedented nature of that. And it's interesting when you talk to business people, I'm sure you talk to a lot more than I do, Richard, but a lot of them say that furlough was something that helped them to a huge degree, made sure their businesses didn't fall over, and they give Rishi Sunak a lot of credit for that.
Indeed,
but
so
the
do
question
I.
is, how do you kind of come back from that, and how do you then sort of get an economy which is back to what the Conservative vision of it should, and Rishi Sunak's vision of it should be, because obviously he's quite a sort of Thatcherite, low taxes, high growth kind of guy. So it'll be interesting to see what he talks about tomorrow.
What surprises me is that he's clearly being dominated by officials in the Treasury who are saying that you've got to cut, you've got to cut debt. And I worry that it's going to force the country back into austerity, literally Mark II, when actually we've got record low interest rates. They could put all of the Bank of England's debt, the government's own debt, they could put that all on a long-term 75-year term, and they could create growth. They could cut taxes, get some growth, and that creates higher wages, that creates higher revenues, tax revenues. The evidence in countries like Australia's there, they seem to have forgotten all that.
I think this is a moment of high risk for the government, the cost of living crisis, the fact that, as you said a moment ago, the army are being sent in to dole out petrol to people, the fact that they've had to do a bit of a reverse ferret on immigration, getting those 5,000 visas and so on. So in terms of the economy, this is a high risk moment.
Well, they've got lots of challenges. You'll be talking about that in the show over the next hour. Thank you very much for stepping in as I go to do my bit. You've been listening to Tice Talk this morning. I hope you've enjoyed the shorter 2-hour show. Thanks very much to my amazing outside broadcast production team. This is Tice Talk. It's the home of common sense. It's Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
Online and on your smart TV. Talk Radio TV News.
Live at 12, I'm Nadira Tudor. Boris Johnson refuses to rule out that shortages could be resolved in time for Christmas. Questions raised about Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, and how he was granted permission to protect Parliament. And back after COVID, marathon runners take to the streets of London in the name of charity. The Prime Minister has refused to rule out that food and fuel shortages will be resolved by Christmas. Boris Johnson says he knew about the lack of lorry drivers long before June and made the comments as his party meet for their conference in Manchester. He's expected to promise big, bold decisions as petrol shortages and panic buying continue. From tomorrow, the military is to begin delivering supplies across the UK as the government announced it's extending the temporary visa scheme for around 5,000 foreign lorry drivers. Speaking to the BBC, the Prime Minister said controlled immigration is key.
The way forward for our country is not to just pull the big lever marked uncontrolled immigration and allow in huge numbers of people.
It's been revealed that the killer of Sarah Everard was on duty at Parliament at least 5 times last year. Police confirmed that Wayne Couzens was deployed to guard MPs at the House of Commons. The Speaker has now demanded an urgent meeting with the force to discuss the vetting process. Meanwhile, Police Scotland has announced verification checks will be offered to those who are approached by loan officers. This hopes to give reassurance to members of the public following the murder of Sarah Everard. A 15-year-old girl who tested positive for COVID has died on the same day she was due to get her vaccine. Georgia Halliday from Portsmouth was taken to Queen Alexandra Hospital on Tuesday. Her mother has said she was a loving girl, a talented kickboxer and an aspiring musician. Police could soon have tougher powers to tackle demonstrators blocking roads. Priti Patel has promised the new measures after climate group Insulate Britain staged a number of motorway protests over the last 3 weeks. The government has taken out a new injunction, meaning anyone blocking major roads could face imprisonment or an unlimited fine. It also gives police the power to seize protesters' equipment. And the London Marathon says it's a celebration of togetherness as the event returns after COVID. 40,000 runners are taking part in the 26.2-mile charity fundraiser in London at the moment, while others are taking part virtually in cities across the UK. Event organisers say it's a celebration of all the good that comes when we're united. And your weather, rain clearing for most this afternoon with sunny spells expected. The south and west can expect some shower with highs of 17 degrees. That's your live news on Talk Radio TV. More in half an hour.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Good morning, I'm Peter Cardwell, live from Manchester. In fact, at the Reform UK conference, I'm in the hot seat taking over from Richard Tice, and I'm with you for the next hour because Richard's giving his speech to the party faithful, and we've plenty to talk about here on Talk Radio as well in the next 60 minutes. We're going to talk about the HGV drivers extension, the fact that migrants will come here with HGV licences. They'll be brought into the country to help to solve the crisis. Army drivers are here as well. They're being brought in and will be delivering petrol from tomorrow. What does it all mean for the shelves? Are we going to get Christmas turkeys there? What's going on and how is the government dealing with this? We're also going to talk about Sajid Javid's care comments. He said that people who work in care homes should get the jab, otherwise they should get a new job. Do you agree with him? What do you think? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text us on 87222. Use the word talk in your text and tweet us at Talk Radio. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's wonderful to have your company live from Manchester. This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB, and on your smart speaker. This is Talk Radio.
This is indeed Talk Radio. Peter Cardwell here live from Manchester. An absolute pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Let's spend the next hour together. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the Prime Minister, because he's here, of course, for a Conservative Party conference. It's their annual conference in Manchester. And one of the first things he did this morning was give a big interview where he admitted the HGV chaos in our country may last until Christmas. He's said that he repeatedly tried to avoid saying if he agreed with Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor. His big speech is tomorrow. Rishi Sunak has refused to rule out shelf shortages continuing not just till Christmas, but past Christmas. So this really is a crisis for the government. It's a crisis for all of the rest of us as well, because lots of people can't get things in the supermarkets. Of course, there aren't enough HGV drivers, something like 120,000 vacancies of HGV drivers. It's not just about Brexit. It's not just about COVID. This is a much longer issue, of course, we've been talking about. And let's talk about it now with Laurie McFarland, the economics editor at Open Democracy. Laurie, you're very welcome to Talk Radio. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Tell us what is going on here. What are the contributory factors here, and what is the way out of this mess?
Well, what we're seeing here in the UK just now is crises on multiple different fronts. We have soaring gas prices, energy bills, we've got supply chain issues, shortages of various things, the most critical of which, as you mentioned, is fuel. Now, the common theme among all of this really is a failure to plan properly. In terms of fuel, the UK is facing the shortage of HGV drivers. We've known about this for some time. Part of this is about long-term issues like poor pay and conditions in the sector, meaning that it's not attractive enough for people to get into. You have people either retiring from that sector and people not coming into it, particularly those from the UK. But this has been exacerbated and made worse by a failure to plan properly for implementing Brexit. And so while this issue isn't necessarily created solely by Brexit, it has been made worse by the government's sort of chaotic implementation of Brexit. It's been warned time and time again by the industry that unless measures were taken long before now, we would see these kind of supply chain issues. We would see issues in things like delivery of fuel and food. And the government has failed to act now until it's too late.
It's interesting you said, I think twice there, about a failure to plan properly. Is this all about the government, or does the HGV industry, food distribution, supermarkets and all the rest of it, do they have a role to play here as well? Should they have planned properly? Should they share some of the blame?
Well, I think the sector has been voicing its concerns for some time. It has been warning the government about this, and ultimately they have to operate in the rules of the game that are set by the government and the legal frameworks that are set by the government. And, you know, we know for a fact that there are around 16,000 fewer EU nationals working in the HGV drivers this year as there were last year. That's not new. We knew that may well happen if the government didn't change course. And so while the industry, the supermarket industry and the haulage industry, etc., clearly they are relevant stakeholders here, but they have been raising these concerns for some time, and they can't get hold of drivers at the moment, and unless the government changes course.
It's interesting, of course, you talk about getting hold of drivers there. The government, of course, is allowing many thousands of drivers in, another 5,000 sort of announced today or in the last couple of days. It's interesting, isn't it, that there's not just a problem here in the UK, but of course across Europe as well. And if you're someone who is sitting in, say, Poland with an HGV driver's license for the UK, maybe you've gone home over COVID to be with your family, why would you come back necessarily, especially if your visa is not going to be for a particularly long period of time?
Well, exactly, and I think that's a real risk that we face now, is that the visas that have been extended, have been offered, are very, very short term indeed. And there's an assumption that these will all be filled very quickly. And I think that's a very, very risky assumption to make. As you say, these drivers are in demand, frankly, across Europe. And why would you necessarily come back to the UK when it's only a very, very short period of time, when you can have secure, perhaps better paid work elsewhere? And so there isn't really a quick fix to this issue, unfortunately. This is something that's been sort of
So it's not going to be over by Christmas, is it, Laurie?
Absolutely not. No, this is unfortunately going to be with us for some time. And bearing in mind, this comes at a very difficult time for households. We're seeing, as I mentioned, soaring energy bills. We've had universal credit cut by £20 a week. We have other pressures building. We've had the furlough scheme come to an end. You know, households are really, really facing a very, very challenging winter here, on top of not being able to necessarily get hold of various things in shops. Obviously, Christmas is a very busy time for families across the country. And so I think we are looking at a very challenging couple of months. And unfortunately, there is no quick fix to that.
Laurie, thank you so much for joining us. I just have one texter who's asked us, what do you think of the government asking German residents to drive lorries, even if they never have before? Have you heard this proposal?
I haven't. No, the UK government asking German residents to drive.
Yes, indeed. I think that's one proposal that's been put forward. But not to worry if you hadn't heard of it. It wasn't one I'd heard of before either. But there we go. Laurie McFarland, economics editor at Open Democracy. Thank you so much for joining us on Talk Radio this morning. And maybe you're an HGV driver. Maybe you're someone who's in huge demand at the moment. Maybe your wages have gone up, but you've had a rough time over the past little while. We'd like to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text us on 87222 to start your text with the word TALK. Or you can tweet us at Talk Radio. So it's really interesting that the lorry drivers, of course, are under pressure to deliver. The food distribution network is under pressure as well. Are you getting what you need on the shelves? Are the supermarkets supplying you with what you need? And maybe you're worried about Christmas as well. I also want to hear from care workers this morning. If you're a care worker, Sajid Javid, the health secretary, has made some pretty strong comments in the last 24 hours where he's talking about care workers not getting jabbed. And of course, there's a deadline which is coming up very rapidly for those care workers to be jabbed to make sure that they are safe. Certainly the government would say that. But if you haven't got a jab, should you then lose your job? Let us know what you think about that. That's all coming up in a moment here on Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, live from Manchester. I'm Peter Cardwell. We're at the Reform UK's conference, which is ongoing at the moment. And later on today, I'm going to head up the road, just literally about a mile away, to the Conservative Party conference, where I'll be covering as political editor for Talk Radio for the next 3 days. Rishi Sunak's big speech is tomorrow. Boris Johnson's is on Wednesday. But it's actually Sajid Javid I want to talk about now. He's the Health Secretary, and he's made some pretty uncompromising comments about care workers. So this is what he said. He told care home staff to get out and get another job if they don't have COVID vaccinations, amid warnings that making jobs mandatory could see 100,000 workers quitting the sector. Now, there are already tens of thousands of vacancies within the care sector already. And remember, these people do an incredibly important job looking after vulnerable people, often elderly people who can't look after themselves towards the end of their life. So this is a really, really important part of our economy, part of our society, these people who do a great job. Should they be penalised because they don't want to get the vaccination? Surely it's personal choice. I've got my vaccinations. I got my 2 vaccinations. I'd love everybody to get them, but I'm certainly not going to ram it down anybody's throat to say that they absolutely have to get it, because it should be personal choice, even though I think it's a very clear personal choice myself, but I totally accept that other people may disagree with that. So it's interesting because the people are saying the government should back down on this, but Sajid Javid says he was not prepared to pause a requirement for care home staff to be fully vaccinated by the 11th of November, so just over a month from now. He told the BBC, if you want to work in a care home, these are the Health Secretary's words, if you want to work in a care home, you're working with some of the most vulnerable people in our country, and if you cannot be bothered to go and get vaccinated, then go out and go and get another job. The words of the Health Secretary. What do you think of that? Maybe you work in the care sector, maybe you're jabbed, maybe you're not jabbed, but what do you think of that? Are you going to walk out? Are you going to get another job? There's lots of jobs in our economy at the moment. There are lots of people who can be employed. It's very interesting that we've had someone texting in on this already saying, happy to put care workers on the front line with inferior PPI, I think she means PPE last year. Now couldn't care less, but now ready to discard them like broken toys on the scrap heap. Despicable. So there we are. Let's get into this with someone who knows their onions on this. It's Nicola Richards. She's the Managing Director of Palms Row Healthcare Limited. Nicola, you're very welcome to Talk Radio. Thanks for making the time this afternoon. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
Excellent. What do you make of the Health Secretary's comments? They're pretty uncompromising, aren't they, Nicola?
I was, when I listened to it yesterday, I was just absolutely stunned at what it said. And now I'm actually really, really angry. I think it's incredibly naive of him to think that, you know, this is not going to impact on frontline services. And I think the only thing that we're asking for is more time on this one, more time, and to make it a fair, level playing field. Because why is it singled out social care again? You know, we're not looking at health colleagues who also look after vulnerable people. We've actually lost staff to go to work for the NHS because they don't have to have the jab. So how is that fair when we've already got a workforce that's incredibly, you know, tired, fragile, and we haven't got enough workforce to look after the people at the moment, and that's a real challenge, and we've not even hit winter yet.
Because it is a bit absurd, isn't it, Nicola, or many people would find it absurd, that you can, you know, there's this huge requirement on the care sector, but no requirement, as you indicate there, on the NHS. So presumably people who work for you could just say, wow, I'm not going to get the job, but very quickly get a job in the NHS where there are still a lot of vacancies, and be caring for people who are in a similar position.
It's absolutely insane, because we've got staff who are leaving social care to go and work in the NHS. So when we send our residents to hospital, you know, they're being cared for by people who potentially have not had the vaccine. So I just don't understand the rationale behind this. And as we're saying, we just want this to be a fair, level playing field. So when all healthcare is looked at on this, that we're included. So I think it's naive and a total lack of understanding of what actually is happening on the front line. And for me, as a director leading a team throughout this pandemic, as somebody's just indicated, with a lack of PPE, with a lack of testing, when they were absolutely terrified of what COVID looked like, for me to be now facing, giving them a P45, it's just absolutely soul destroying, because these people have worked in social care for many years and have done a fantastic job.
Can I just ask, Nicola, the obvious question here is why people are not getting the vaccination. I understand there are people who don't want to get it for lots of different reasons, and we absolutely should not bully people into getting it. We should encourage people. I think the science is pretty clear that people should get vaccinated. I've been vaccinated. I can honestly say that the day my parents, who are both in their 70s, got vaccinated for their first jab was a day of huge relief to me. But of course there are people who don't want to get vaccinated. Why is there resistance there? You talk to these people who are not getting vaccinated, staff of yours, presumably every day. Why don't they want to get vaccinated?
I mean, I've had a really good uptake on the vaccine. I've only got 2 staff members who are still hesitant around it. So I'm really fortunate. But for me, I can't afford to lose those 2 staff members. So I think they've got their own reasons. I think some of them do want just more time to consider what it looks like. And I think there's also possibly a little bit of, feeling let down by government, because again, we're not talking across all the healthcare sector. So I think they feel that they've been singled out again. They've been let down by government again.
What's it been like, Nicola, for you and for your staff in those care homes over this pandemic? Just paint a picture for us how difficult it has been for these people to do their jobs.
I mean, I've worked in social care for nearly 25 years, and I cannot tell you, how difficult this has been. It's been the most challenging period, and, for staff who've worked in it, I cannot praise them enough. They have been absolutely incredible. Our families, our residents, they've all been through a really turbulent time, and it's been the darkest moments in 25 years. It's been something else, and something else that we'll look back on, and I do worry moving forward, how this will impact on our staff and their well-being when we take some time out to look at what we've all been through. It's been horrendous.
It's interesting, of course, as well, that the government is moving now in terms of saying that people will have to pay more for their care. They're changing the rules around this. I mean, care is very, very expensive, isn't it? You're talking about hundreds of pounds, maybe even over £1,000 a week for people to be in care homes. Is that fair? Where does that money actually go, Nicola?
Well, I'm an operator that looks after 95% of residents who are funded by government. And I think given the fact that last year I had to close one of my homes during the pandemic, which relies on government funding, I think that tells you all you need to know, that the sector has been underfunded for decades, absolutely. And that's something that we've all been saying for years. COVID's come along. It was an incredibly fragile sector pre-COVID. And so homes just won't survive this. And I think what the government have recently announced with, the funding, it's not really going to make a difference. We're going to get the coppers of what the NHS don't use ultimately. It's smoke screen and mirrors, in my opinion.
Okay. We've had Hetch get in touch to say there were ridiculous comments by the Health Secretary. It is not a case of can't be bothered to get a jab. People can think for themselves and have very good reasons for not having the vaccine. Presumably you would agree with that, Nicola?
Absolutely. I would love him to come and sit with our staff who've been fighting COVID, put their own lives at risk, and tell them they can't be bothered. As he actually sat with care staff and discussed this through. I doubt very much he has. And to make flippant comments like that absolutely infuriates me, because I know what our staff have been through. I know what our families, our residents have been through. So I think for our residents to be losing people who have become their family because of this, losing people to the NHS and staff to the NHS, it's incredibly sad.
There were all sorts of rules, of course, during the pandemic in terms of who could actually enter care homes, families seeing older people, often people anybody, of course, loves to see their family. Most people, anyway, love to see their family coming. But of course, when you're at that very vulnerable stage, sometimes it's very upsetting not to see people. Perhaps some of your residents think that their family don't care. Maybe they haven't quite the cognitive abilities to know what's going on in terms of COVID and so on. It's a very bleak picture. What is it like now? Can people come in? Do they have to be tested? Just paint a picture as to how the rules are now in terms of your care homes, Nicola. Can people get in and see their elderly relatives?
Yes, they can. I mean, we invested in visitor pods during lockdown, so we could still facilitate outside visits in the pods with a screen.
What is a visitor pod? Sorry, I'm just not familiar with that, Nicola. Maybe you could explain what that is.
It was just an outside, a glass pod, basically, where people could come out and see loved ones, and they had an intercom system. They couldn't obviously sit because we had to have a screen. But now, obviously, we're open to visitors. We have to do. It's still got challenges because you've still got the testing each time that visitors come in. But actually, you know, we're allowing visitors back in, and that's brilliant to see our residents reunited with their loved ones. But there's still challenges, and I can't stress that the staff challenges that we face now are worse than what we had at the beginning of the pandemic.
Well, just on those staff challenges, Rainmaker has been in touch on Twitter to say the NHS would crumble just like care homes will. I heard of a full-time carer who left care to work in a supermarket. Better pay and less stress. That sounds pretty clear, doesn't it?
Yes, I've lost nearly 17 to 19% of my workforce during COVID for those very reasons, that the stress just was too much, and they made their own lifestyle choices. So I think, as I've just said, you know, the staffing challenges now, and we're not even at winter yet, we've not hit winter pressures, is worse than it was last April. I can't stress that enough. And I think this is why we are all stressing that the need to really press the pause button on this, because we cannot afford, and as I alluded to earlier, I've got 2 staff members that this will affect. I cannot afford to lose those 2 staff members. It's as simple as that.
What would you say to Brad in Cambridge, who's been in touch to say, he's texted us to say, if these people do not care enough to get the job, they should be doing a different job. What do you say to that, Nicola?
I think it's not about those staff don't care. We very much know those staff do care, because those staff put their own lives at risk before vaccines were around, when government weren't supplying us with sufficient PPE, when we'd not got the testing in place, when they were doing it for low paid wages and putting their own lives at risk. I cannot stress that enough. So I think it's really unfair to say our staff don't care. They absolutely do. The only thing we're asking for, as I said before, is be consistent with this across all of the healthcare services. That's all we're asking for. Health and social care, it should be a consistent approach. But yet again, social care has been singled out by government.
Nicola Richards, Managing Director at Palms Row Healthcare Limited, thank you so much for joining us and really giving us a very good insight into what's going on in your care homes today. I really appreciate that, Nicola. And maybe you're a care worker, maybe you're someone who has an elderly relative in a care home. What do you think of Sajid Javid's comments there? Very, very clear comments, very direct comments from Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, where he said, if you want to work in a care home, you're working with some of the most vulnerable people in our country, and if you cannot be bothered to go and get vaccinated, then go out and get another job. Very, very strong comments there, with which Nicola disagrees, and many of our texters and tweeters do. You can join them. Text us on 87222 and use the word talk in your text. Tweet us at Talk Radio or give us a call 0344 499 1000. It'd be lovely to have a chat with you. I'm Peter Cardwell, live from Manchester, and this is Talk Radio.
Online and on your smart TV. Talk Radio TV News.
Here are your headlines. I'm Nadira Tudor. Boris Johnson refuses to rule out that shortages could be resolved in time for Christmas. Questions raised about Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, and how he was granted permission to protect Parliament. And back after COVID, marathon runners take to the streets of London in the name of charity. The Prime Minister has refused to rule out that food and fuel shortages will be resolved by Christmas. Boris Johnson says he knew about the lack of lorry drivers long before June and made the comments as his party meet for their conference in Manchester. He's expected to promise big, bold decisions as petrol shortages and panic buying continue. From tomorrow, the military is to begin delivering supplies across the UK as the government announces extending the temporary visa scheme for around 5,000 foreign lorry drivers. Speaking to the BBC, the Prime Minister said controlled immigration is key.
The way forward for our country is not to just pull the big lever marked uncontrolled immigration and allow in huge numbers of people.
It's been revealed that the killer of Sarah Everard was on duty at Parliament at least 5 times last year. Police confirmed that Wayne Couzens was deployed to guard MPs at the House of Commons. The Speaker has now demanded an urgent meeting with the force to discuss the vetting process. Meanwhile, Police Scotland has announced verification checks will be offered to those who are approached by loan officers. This hopes to give reassurance to members of the public following the murder of Sarah Everard. And the London Marathon says it's a celebration of togetherness as the event returns after COVID. 40,000 people are running in the capital while others are taking part virtually. That's your news on Talk Radio TV. More in half an hour.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, this is Peter Cardwell live from Manchester on Talk Radio. It's an absolute pleasure to join you. Why am I here? Well, we're at the Reform UK conference. Richard Tice, of course, was here for the last 2 hours. He's been giving his speech to the party faithful. And for political nerds like me, you might have heard I've been made the political editor of Talk Radio. It's my new job, as well as occasionally presenting on here. For political nerds like me, there's not just one, but 2 conferences. So Reform UK and, of course, the Conservatives are starting their conference later on today. So I'll be there with Julia Hartley-Brewer on Talk Radio right throughout the conference. It's going to be on tomorrow morning. Julia, of course, 6:30 till 10, and join us for that. Rishi Sunak's big speech, the Chancellor tomorrow, the Prime Minister, his big speech on Wednesday. In fact, the Prime Minister was out today jogging in a shirt. Bit weird. So there we are. Anyway, he was pictured on a jog wearing a pretty very clean white shirt, so maybe he forgot his t-shirt, we don't know. I'm with you until 1 o'clock when Bob Mills takes over. We've had plenty of reaction to the stories we're covering this morning, not just the HGV story, of course, with the distribution crisis in our country, petrol, goods, whether animals will be slaughtered in time for Christmas, for example, is another one. Adrian in Daventry has been in touch to say, Peter, does Laurie McFarlane think the government employ the lorry drivers? Surely the haulage companies employ the drivers, and it is the haulage companies who have not provided decent wages and conditions. And then, of course, we were talking about the care system, those very strong comments from Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, that if people in the care system, as he put it, can't be bothered to get a jab, then they should go and get another job. Of course, there are tens of thousands of vacancies already in the care system. We spoke to Nicola, who runs some care homes, and in fact, Diana Harding has been in touch on Twitter to say, well said, Nicola Richards of Palms Row Healthcare. I speak as someone whose recently departed mum was in a care home for 4 years. These people kept my mum safe before there was a vaccination. Why are they being picked on? Why not NHS staff? And it's interesting, I think Diana makes a really good point there in terms of the fact that NHS staff, of course, aren't required to get the vaccination, whereas those in care homes are, and the deadline for that is November the 11th. Diana, thank you so much for getting in touch with me on Talk Radio, and I'm very sorry to hear about your mother's death there. It's very good of you to get in touch, especially mentioning that, which must be a very troubling and difficult thing to get through. I hope you and your family are well, and I know that you I'm sure have lots of good people around you. Catherine in Cardiff has been in touch to say, Peter, who cared about the carers when people were being bundled out of hospitals and their thousands into the hands of those with no PPE or any idea of what the health consequences might be for them? Shame on Sajid Javid, says Catherine in Cardiff. We're going to take a couple of we're going to take a couple of callers, apologies, on this. Unfortunately, I can't see their names on the screen just at the moment, but I know there are a couple of callers who we're going to talk to. Mary is there. Mary, you're live on Talk Radio. Tell me what your thoughts on this matter are.
Yes, hi Peter. I'm a retired nurse.
Hi Mary.
And hi, I worked in a care home for a short period of time. It's really, really hard work, and the staff, they put everything into their jobs and care for the residents. That's their home for the residents, and they're like family. And I'm absolutely shocked that Sajid Javid has said that. It's disgraceful. He's going to create a crisis in the care home sector by stating that. And you said that, why are the care staff not having the jab? Because, you were following the signs, you were glad when your parents got it. But we're into this pandemic, it's over a year now, and there's data emerging with the vaccines. They're not stopping transmission, and they're actually causing the double jab to be more likely to get COVID again, because they didn't test the elderly in the trials, the very cohort of people that need to be protected from this. Now, these care staff worked last year when this pandemic hit the country with very poor PPE, going into their work, not knowing if this virus had a higher fatality rate. And we now know that it doesn't. It's got a 0.26% infection fatality rate. Obviously, it's higher in the elderly.
I think we've lost Mary there.
No,
Mary, can you hear me?
Hello, are you there?
Oh no, I've got you back. Sorry, there's a slight break there. Clearly, some gremlins in the systems between. Where are you? You're in Glasgow, Mary. Is that right?
Yes, Peter. I'm just saying I think it's disgraceful that Sajid Javid has said this. It's as if the government is just blundering their way through, causing crisis after crisis. You said you didn't know why the care staff the homes, they didn't want to get the vaccine. Well, it's a completely new technology. It's an emerging, there's evidence coming out it doesn't stop transmission. The manufacturer said that it wouldn't stop transmission. It doesn't give you immunity.
Have you had your jab, Mary, or have you decided not to have it?
I've decided not to have it because I had COVID and so did my husband, and it was like the worst flu. It was really dreadful. I was extremely ill. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. So because I'm a nurse and I've been involved in vaccination programmes and given thousands of vaccines in my career, I said to my husband, I don't think we'll need the vaccine because we've had COVID and we had, it was pretty bad, and I'm sure we'll have had a good antibody response. So the evidence is now showing if you've had COVID, you've got better immunity than being double vaccinated. And if you've had COVID and you get the injection, you're 6 to 7 times more likely to take a reaction to the vaccine. So I'm just relying on my innate immunity, and I'm sure some of the care home staff have decided that as well. So basically, the science is showing, Peter. I know that your parents were vaccinated and everybody recommended that at the beginning, but we're now into almost not quite a year of vaccination, but the emerging data is showing, as I said, that it's not protecting you from COVID. If in fact it's actually causing more problems. You just need to look at the data emerging from Israel. I mean, they're now saying that the people have to have a third booster and you're not considered vaccinated until you have your booster. So how long is this going to go on? And also, Peter, in the BBC...
Mary,
Sorry, can I just say, it actually showed that...
Go ahead, of course, yeah.
It actually showed, there was a scientist on the BBC saying that after 6 weeks post-vaccination, the neutralising antibodies in your bloodstream are depleted quite severely, and basically what that means is your neutralising antibodies are like your Centrigars or your bouncers at a nightclub. You don't want to let any undesirables in. So basically, if in an elderly patient, if you've got neutralising antibodies that are depleted so badly, or an immunocompromised person or people with comorbidities, that's going to just make them very vulnerable to the next variant or any virus. So I think there has to be a moratorium on the vaccines, and I think they really have to say, Sajid Javid has to really think about things and say, we're not going to have this draconian measure. And the care home staff should not be forced to be vaccinated. We're supposed to live in an open democratic country. And what's the point of the vaccine passports if the vaccines aren't working?
Okay, Mary, thank you so much for your insight there. Mary, of course, who was a nurse and then worked in a care home as well. Thank you so much for joining us on Talk Radio. I got to stress, I'm not a medical professional. I obviously can't stand over everything that Mary said in that, but she definitely makes some very valid points. And we've had a number of people getting in touch. Nick on Twitter, for example, who says about the mandatory vaccination of care home workers. Why are you not pointing out that A, vaccination doesn't stop transmission? That's absolutely true. Thank you for that, Nick. And B, those who've had COVID present zero risk. Roy Livermore on text has said, notice how Nicola, who was our guest earlier, Nicola Richards, Managing Director of Palms Row Healthcare Limited, Nicola avoided your question of where the huge fees go. Nicola, of course, said quite a lot in her interview, and we really thank her for that. I would have liked to get into a little bit more about the fees. I think a lot of people, especially people with elderly relatives who are in care homes maybe for a number of years, ask, why is it maybe £1,000 a week in some places, maybe more than that in some places for these care home fees. And Martin in Stoke-on-Trent on text has said, face it, if you had a loved one in a care home and they're clinically vulnerable, you'd want them to be safe no matter what. I'd want my mum's carers vaccinated. Why don't I or my mum get a say in that? And that's a fair point, actually, from Martin in Stoke-on-Trent. We're going to talk about why some celebrities have stopped washing. Let's get into that in just a moment here on Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
This is Talk Radio.
This is indeed Talk Radio, live from Manchester. But why are we in Manchester? Well, I've made the journey from London, as have my trusty sidekicks who are keeping us on air this morning, James and Ricky. We've come up here because it is not just the Conservative Party conference that's happening up the road about a mile away, but also the Reform UK conference. And Richard Tice, of course, was here between 10 and 12, and he's been giving his leader's speech for Reform UK. But the Conservative Party conference is a much bigger deal. I'm now the political editor of Talk Radio, as you may know, and I'll be joining Julia Hartley-Brewer each morning, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, live from Conservative Party conference inside that secure zone. And believe me, there's a lot of checks to get in. You've got to get a police check before you even get a pass to get in. So lots of people from right around the country who are all Conservative activists have come together, just as they did in Brighton last week, the Labour activists there. And of course, Talk Radio gave you full coverage there as well. So what we're doing here as Talk Radio, of course, is giving you full coverage of what's happening. Rishi Sunak is the Chancellor. His big speech is tomorrow. Boris Johnson, the other headline speech, is on Wednesday. And it's a very important speech for him because he's not just talking to the country as the Prime Minister, but of course he's also talking to the party faithful, the people who go out there and knock the doors and give out the leaflets in all weathers. And it's interesting, I worked in politics actually for about 3.5 years, and what a very wise man and one of my bosses, a guy called James Brokenshire, told me was that what you've got to remember in any political party, no matter which stripe, whichever shade of opinion it is that the people who are the MPs and the advisors and the Prime Minister or Cabinet Minister or, Keir Starmer as leader of the opposition, they're a tiny, tiny bit of the party. The vast majority of any political party are volunteers or people who have decided that they want to be a party activist for free, essentially, and indeed pay money to come to places like here in Manchester. The travel costs, the accommodation costs, the food costs, and for many people it can mount up, almost be the cost of sort of a foreign holiday or something like that. Might spend £400 or £500 or more coming to Manchester or Brighton in the case of Labour, and of course the Liberal Democrats this year, they did their conference virtually rather than in person because of all the COVID restrictions and so on. I suppose it's interesting. Some people sometimes ask me, what's the point of a party conference? And I suppose if they didn't exist already, you probably wouldn't set them up. But they've existed for a long time. There are lots of businesses and different lobbyists and so on who come to speak to ministers. There are the party faithful who listen to the speeches and take part in things like fringe events, so smaller events where there are all sorts of people, journalists and thinkers, think tank people, MPs who put their points across and have a real debate about the future of the country. So it's for political nerds like me, political conferences are a really fun and interesting thing, whereas sometimes other people may switch off slightly and say, actually, I just want to fill up my car with petrol. Why are we caring about party conferences? So we'll be here in Manchester the next few days. Julia Hartley-Brewer live from 6:30 tomorrow morning. We're going to talk now about whether there's a bit of a whiff in the air here in Manchester and elsewhere, because A-list celebrities have given up washing. Why? Let's talk to Ophelia Verrate, who's a consultant dermatologist. She's in the studio in London. Ophelia, you're very welcome to Talk Radio. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So we have Jake Gyllenhaal, who has revealed that more and more I find bathing to be less and less necessary. Is that true?
So I've been asked about this on a number of occasions because it's a kind of growing trend, and I think started by celebrities, and it's gained traction on social media, and it's quite unfortunate actually because yes, there has been a lot of research done over the years on skin, and I think people who don't understand the outcome of those papers have kind of taken the data and twisted it to kind of turn it into this trend which seems to be growing in traction. So yes, we've got millions of bacteria and viruses on our skin, and that's normal. It's called the microbiome, and it needs a balance for skin health. However, if you have an imbalance, it can often cause skin disease. So we know that Staphylococcus aureus, for instance, can drive eczema flares, and eczema is becoming increasingly common. So it's very important actually to stay clean. And then, you know, there's the other bit of advice. As dermatologists, we're always advising people not to use harsh soaps because they strip the skin. And you know, you can gently cleanse on a daily basis, but you don't need to be using these, you know, strong soaps that draw moisture from the skin and can cause a break in the skin barrier, which can lead to infection and whatnot. And I think particularly in these times, it's potentially dangerous to be encouraging people not to shower and bathe. So yeah, it's unfortunate.
So just to be clear,
yeah.
Should we have a shower or a bath every day? Presumably you think we should.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, particularly if you've got a skin condition. You don't want your skin to get broken. I mean, diabetes is one of the most common diseases, and if you get broken, infected skin on your lower legs, you can end up with ulcers that don't heal for years. So it's really important to stay clean, but gently, just gently. You know, you don't need to use a harsh soap, and a lot of them. A lot of the popular ones have got very lots of ingredients such as fragrance and preservatives, which are not necessarily needed. So it's about selection of what we use if we want to be gentle on our skin, which I think has been twisted in the media into something that it's not.
Ophelia, I'm going to ask you another question, and it's based on the fact that I've decided today, simply for the purposes of this interview, not because I'm, you know, lazy, to wear exactly the same clothes as I wore yesterday.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've changed my underwear and my socks, but I'm wearing the same shirt and the same suit. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think to wear clothes, you know, on double days is fine. But when I'm in the teaching hospital that I work in, sometimes we have to admit patients because they don't, you know, they haven't changed their clothes or bathed for weeks and weeks, and they've got and that infection and bacteria has really driven their skin disease. So I think we have to take all these things with a pinch of salt, of course. To where, you know, I wore these jeans yesterday, it's fine. You know,
how many days is too long? What's the kind of maximum, do you think, to wear a shirt or underwear?
Well, I think it depends on the context, particularly if you're out and about, where you pick up a lot of pollution, and even things with coronavirus, you know, you will so if you've been out and about in a hospital, in the supermarket, I always advise when you get home, wash your clothes, have a shower. If you've been at home doing nothing for the whole weekend and not really doing much, I think it's less important. So you need to put these things, no one rule is it fits for everybody, as with most things in life.
Just finally, Dr. Ophelia Verhage, do celebrities need to be more responsible in terms of what they're saying, in terms of what they're putting out there? Because they have an absolute megaphone in all of these trends, not just washing, in terms of the kind of life advice they give. Because we've seen, you know, the absolute nonsense that Gwyneth Paltrow has put out, which is based on absolute junk. Well, there's so many bits of junk science that she has put out, and people lap it up. I mean, do you think celebrities need to be more responsible?
Of course. I mean, one of the issues is that dermatology is a very small field, particularly in the UK, in America as well, I believe so. And, you know, we haven't been the best at leading this huge industry. And, you know, the skin's the largest organ. It's exceedingly complex to understand, and you know, most of us have got, you know, 10-20 years of training behind us before we can even say that we're a consultant dermatologist. And it's yes, I mean, celebrities don't have you know, unless you're I don't want to be disparaging, but you know, I don't think that they've got the authority to be coming out with views about skin health and hair health, and these are quite serious
I think you can
matters.
be as disparaging as you want. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I feel you can be as disparaging as you like to celebrities who have no medical training, who don't have the decades of experience that you have, and are in no fit state to give people advice on this. So, Dr. Ophelia Verh, consultant dermatologist, thank you so much for joining us on Talk Radio today, and indeed for coming into the studio. Appreciate that. We're going to talk to Bob Mills in a second, but first of all, I just wanted to read a couple of tweets. Pablo the Hat has got in touch regarding care homes. Where is all the money going? One of the money drains for smaller care providers is the extra cost of expensive compulsory training and a high staff turnover. The only folks making real money are the training course providers, says Pablo. Thank you for that. Sushi Ginger has tweeted me to say the government doesn't employ the lorry drivers, we were talking about HGV drivers earlier, but their job is to keep an eye on what's going on to prevent a crisis like we have now. Fair point. And someone else has been in touch on Twitter to say ref shirted Boris, this was Boris Johnson, who's gone for a run this morning in a white shirt, collared shirt, maybe not jogging, possibly an escape bid. An interesting one there. Manchester's not that bad, let me tell you. And that person has also said congratulations on your well-deserved appointment as political editor. Hope to hear much more from you. So thank you very much. That was incredibly kind. Bob Mills is in London. Bob, how are you doing today, and what's coming up on your show?
Well, I'm doing very, very well, and thank you. But before we go anything, Olivia's still here. Dr. Olivia's here, and I want to talk to her just about something. I know you'll allow me a minute to do it, because someone told me I'm doing something. I'm following orders. I haven't washed my hair for 11 days because someone said, "Now listen to me." Someone
I'm listening.
Had a look at my scalp and said, "You're washing your hair too much. There's too much chemical in there." I haven't washed it for 11 days. I've been using a sea salt spray, and my hair's never felt better.
It looks nice.
It does, doesn't it? It really does. I'm a very, very beautifully, coiffured man, as it were.
I mean, you're an attractive man anyway,
Are people
Bob.
winding me up, or is there sense
fact.
in what they're telling me?
I think with hair washing, it's a different thing, and a lot of shampoos have got very stringent cleaning properties that do strip the natural oils from the scalp, and I think people have a lot of people get into the habit of washing their hair every day or every other day, and it's not necessary, and the hair does tend to cleanse itself.
Excellent, thank you so much for that. I'm sorry I hijacked that a little bit. I'm really sorry.
No worries at all, Bob. No worries. Just very briefly, I just want to say a huge thanks to everybody who's made the show possible today. Ricky Freelove and James Larvin have been up here in Manchester doing an absolutely sterling job, and back in London, the top team of David Levine, Sophia Wensler, Dave Rhodes, Sam Fowler and Roddy Mansfield have been keeping us on air. Lots more from the Conservative Party conference. Over to Bob now. Thanks so much for your company over the last hour. I'm Peter Cardwell, and this is Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
online and on your smart TV. Talk Radio TV News.
Live at 1, I'm Nadira Tudor. Boris Johnson refuses to rule out that shortages could be resolved in time for Christmas. Questions raised about Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, and how he was granted permission to protect Parliament. And back after COVID, marathon runners take to the streets of London in the name of charity. The Prime Minister has refused to rule out that food and fuel shortages will be resolved by Christmas. Boris Johnson says he knew about the lack of lorry drivers long before June and made the comments as his party meet for their conference in Manchester. He's expected to promise big, bold decisions as petrol shortages and panic buying continue. From tomorrow, the military is to begin delivering supplies across the UK as the government announced it's extending the temporary visa scheme for around 5,000 foreign lorry drivers. Speaking to the BBC, the Prime Minister said controlled immigration is key.
The way forward for our country is not to just pull the big lever marked uncontrolled immigration and allow in huge numbers of people.
It's been revealed that the killer of Sarah Everard was on duty at Parliament at least 5 times last year. Police confirmed that Wayne Couzens was deployed to guard